They slapped a U.S. general in uniform, in public. Let that sink in. It happened in a small southern town, where two local cops decided that a black man, dressed in full military regalia, had to be a fraud. No questions asked, no protocol followed, just a slap across the face and handcuffs in front of a stunned diner crowd. His name, Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves, decorated war hero, 3-star commander, and a man who had briefed presidents. One officer sneered, "That's for lying, boy," as if his stars were a costume and his service a con. But what happened next? It didn't just rattle Greystone, it shook the country. As James Baldwin once warned, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. If this story angers you or moves you, don't just watch. Speak, comment below, hit like, and subscribe. We're not just telling stories here, we're holding up a mirror. It was supposed to be a quiet stop. Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves, 54, had been on the road for nearly 7 hours, driving southbound on I-95 through North Carolina. The sky was a dusky orange, the kind of early evening glow that made taillights shimmer on the asphalt. He wasn't in a convoy, no security detail, just a rental sedan, a worn GPS clipped to the dash, and an army duffel bag in the back seat. His uniform was flawless, dress blues, 3 silver stars glinting under the dome light as he pulled into a roadside diner called Millie's Grill. He just wanted a burger. Inside, the place was all Formica booths and faded military posters, Vietnam vets, Gulf War heroes, a signed photo of a Marine unit from Afghanistan above the jukebox. The kind of Americana that wrapped itself in camouflage and fried chicken. Malcolm stepped in, and for a moment, the chatter dipped. A couple of truckers looked up. One man tipped his cap. The waitress, early 20s, blonde ponytail name tag said Natalie, offered a kind smile. "Long day, General?" Malcolm smiled back. "Long month." He slid into a corner booth. No drama, no politics, just a soldier grabbing dinner before a high-level briefing at Fort Liberty in the morning. Outside, 2 patrol officers sat parked near the lot entrance. Officer Brent Keller, mid-30s, sharp jaw, buzz cut, boredom etched into every movement. His partner, Officer Riley Dean, leaned back with his boots on the dash, scrolling his phone. Keller nodded toward Malcolm's sedan. "Government plates, but that guy doesn't look right." Dean glanced up. "You mean the black guy in full regalia?" "Yeah, that." They didn't run the plates. They didn't radio dispatch. They just got out of the cruiser and started walking. Inside, Malcolm was halfway through his burger when Natalie returned with a coffee refill. "You stationed nearby?" she asked. Casual, friendly. "No, just passing through." Before she could respond, the bell above the door rang. The 2 officers stepped in. Malcolm glanced up, their eyes locked. Keller took the lead. "Evening," he said, but it wasn't polite. It was a challenge. Malcolm straightened slightly. "Evening, officers. You military?" "Yes. Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves, U.S. Army." Dean scoffed. "That's a hell of a claim." Keller stepped closer, eyes flicking to the stars on Malcolm's shoulder. "Mind showing ID?" "Of course," Malcolm said calmly. "Wallet's in my left pocket. You can take it out if you prefer." But Keller didn't wait. In a split second, his hand flashed and slapped Malcolm hard across the face. A sharp crack echoed through the diner. Forks dropped. Someone gasped. Natalie took a step back, her eyes wide. "That's for lying, boy," Keller spat. Malcolm didn't flinch. His cheeks stung. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I suggest you reassess your actions, officer." Dean pulled out his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer," he sneered. "Do you want to verify my credentials with the Pentagon before you proceed?" Malcolm asked, now rising from the booth slowly. Keller grabbed him by the arm and twisted. "Stand down." The diner erupted. Someone yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" Natalie pulled out her phone and started recording. Within seconds, Malcolm was face down on the hood of his sedan, hands cuffed behind his back, his stars now smeared against dusty paint. As the officers shoved him into the back of the cruiser, he spoke quietly. "My phone's in my right breast pocket. Call the number labeled Pentagon, priority." Dean laughed. "Yeah, sure. And I'm the Secretary of Defense." They slammed the door shut. Inside the car, Malcolm took a breath, not of fear but of calculation. He had been in war zones where enemies didn't wear uniforms. He'd faced chaos and command failures. But what hurt more than Keller's slap was the familiar sting of being seen as a threat, not a patriot. As the cruiser pulled away from Millie's grill, the people left behind weren't silent. Natalie kept filming. An older veteran stood outside, calling someone. A teenage boy whispered, "They just arrested a general." Malcolm stared out the window at the darkening pines. This wasn't about dinner anymore. This was about something much bigger. The Greystone Police Department looked more like a storage facility than a place where justice was served. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, sickly glow on the scuffed tile floors. The air smelled like bleach and old coffee. Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves sat in a cramped holding room, hands still cuffed behind his back, the metal chair cold and uncomfortable beneath him. His cheek still burned from the slap, but his spine was straight. His uniform, though rumpled and slightly stained from the cruiser's vinyl seats, still commanded attention. If only anyone here knew what to look for. Across the room, Officers Keller and Dean lounged like they owned the place. Dean flipped through Malcolm's military ID with exaggerated skepticism. "Got all the bells and whistles," he muttered, smirking. "3 stars. Special ops. Hell, why not 4? Keller leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "People fake stuff like this all the time. Online you can buy a full colonel's uniform for $200. Malcolm didn't speak. Not yet. His eyes drifted to the clock. 10:42 p.m. Every second that ticked by was another second deeper into a hole Greystone PD couldn't climb out of. Keller finally stepped forward. "So what's your endgame, huh? Trying to get free meals? Intimidate a waitress?" Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "You really believe that?" "I believe what I see, and I see a man playing dress-up." Malcolm's voice was low, firm. "You see what you want to see, because the truth doesn't fit your frame." Dean scoffed. Yeah, big words, fake stars." That was the moment Malcolm shifted. Calm, calculated. "My phone is still in my breast pocket," he said, turning slightly. "Unlock it. Call the number labeled Pentagon, priority. You do that, and you'll understand exactly who I am." Keller rolled his eyes. More games. But then the door creaked open. Chief Dana Foster entered. Early 60s, thick gray mustache, eyes baggy with fatigue. He didn't look like he enjoyed being here. In his head was Malcolm's wallet. "This says you're a lieutenant general," he said, voice gravelly. "That true?" Malcolm held his gaze. "Yes, sir. Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves, Joint Special Operations Command. I'm en route to Fort Liberty for a classified briefing." Foster looked down at the ID again, then back at Malcolm. "My officers say you were combative. I provided identification. I offered verification. I warned them not to escalate. They chose otherwise." Foster's jaw tightened. "So you're saying this is on them?" "I'm saying it was avoidable." For a long moment, the room was silent. Keller stood stiff. Dean stopped grinning. Foster shifted his weight, clearly caught between defending his men and acknowledging something had gone terribly wrong. Finally, he reached over to the desk and pulled a landline phone toward Malcolm. "One call. You better be exactly who you say you are." Malcolm nodded. "Put it on speaker." Foster hesitated, then complied. Malcolm read the number from memory, each digit crisp. The phone rang once, twice. "Office of the Deputy Secretary," a professional voice answered. "This is Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves. I need to speak to Secretary Landon. Priority 1. A pause. Then, "Yes, sir, connecting now." Keller's arms dropped. Dean leaned forward, confused. The next voice that filled the room was unmistakable, authoritative, sharp, furious. "Malcolm, where the hell are you?" Everyone froze. Even Foster turned pale. Malcolm didn't waver. In custody at Greystone PD, arrested for impersonation, no probable cause. Officers refused to verify credentials. There was a moment of tense silence. Then Secretary Landon unleashed. "Chief Foster, I don't care if your department has 10 people or 10,000, you've arrested a decorated general on your own soil. Without protocol. If he isn't released in the next 5 minutes, I'm dispatching a military escort, and your governor is getting a call by midnight. Do you understand me?" Foster's hand trembled. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. And Chief? You better hope there aren't cameras." The line went dead. The room was paralyzed. Keller looked like he wanted to disappear. Dean stepped back slowly. Foster motioned frantically at the cuffs. "Get those off, now." Dean fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before finally releasing the restraints. Malcolm flexed his wrists, then stood, towering over them. He didn't raise his voice. A slap, an accusation, a lie. "That's not a mistake, that's a choice." Foster tried to explain. "We thought—" "You didn't think, you judged." Malcolm took his phone and wallet, nodded once, then turned to the door. "I'll find my own way out." And he did. By dawn, the entire town of Greystone was buzzing like a power line in a storm. The video, blurry, shaky, but undeniable, had already gone viral overnight. It showed everything: the slap, the cuffs, the cold disregard for a man in uniform. Natalie's caption beneath it read simply, "They slapped a U.S. general in public for being black." By 7 a.m., it had over 2.4 million views. National networks picked it up before breakfast. CNN ran the headline, "Lieutenant General detained, assaulted by local police in North Carolina." Social media boiled. Hashtags like "Justice for Graves," "Slap of Injustice," and "Honor Not Hate" trended for hours. Even conservative outlets, normally skeptical of viral outrage, couldn't ignore the stars on his shoulders or the voice of Secretary Landon on speakerphone, furious and unforgiving. Outside Greystone PD, a crowd formed by mid-morning. Some held signs. Others stood in stunned silence, unsure how to make sense of what they'd seen. Veterans, young activists, church leaders, even school teachers stood shoulder to shoulder. One sign read, "We salute our heroes. We don't slap them." Inside her apartment above a laundromat, Natalie sat glued to her phone. She hadn't slept. The comments kept pouring in. Messages from soldiers, from retired generals, from everyday people saying thank you for not looking away. She didn't feel brave. She just felt angry. And now she couldn't stay silent. She walked straight to Millie's Grill and asked if they'd hold a press conference there. The owner, a Vietnam vet named Carl, didn't even blink. "Use the counter, say what you need to say." At noon, with local news cameras lined up, Natalie stood behind the same counter where she'd poured Malcolm's coffee the night before. "My name is Natalie Brooks," she began, her voice trembling just slightly. "Last night I watched 2 police officers treat a U.S. general like trash. They didn't ask questions. They didn't verify. They just saw his skin, not his stars. And I couldn't stay quiet." The room erupted in applause. Meanwhile, inside the Pentagon, a different kind of storm was building. Secretary Landon had already spoken to the governor of North Carolina, who promised full cooperation. An emergency Department of Defense task force was formed to audit small-town police departments near military installations, Greystone among the first. But the most intense reaction came from the military itself. Malcolm Graves was no ordinary general. He had led missions overseas that saved hundreds. He briefed 3 presidents. His reputation was forged in the crucible of war and refined by years of quiet, disciplined service. His integrity was bulletproof. So when the Joint Chiefs issued a statement just before the 5 o'clock news, it hit like a missile. "We will not allow our service members to be disrespected, dishonored, or assaulted on U.S. soil, uniform or not. They are owed basic human dignity. What happened to Lieutenant General Graves is unacceptable. That night, Malcolm sat alone in a modest motel outside Fort Liberty. The room was silent, save for the occasional hum of the mini-fridge. His phone buzzed every few seconds, but he let it sit on the nightstand. Messages from friends, fellow officers, even his wife Sheila had come in non-stop. He hadn't answered yet, not because he was avoiding them, but because he wasn't ready. He stared at the television, muted but flashing his face on every major network. Commentators debated whether this would lead to a nationwide reform. Some painted him as a hero. Others argued it was a one-off mistake. But Malcolm knew better. It wasn't a mistake. It was the system working exactly as it was designed, to doubt men like him, to reduce decades of honor to suspicion in a single glance. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Colonel Denise Warren, his longtime colleague and intelligence lead, stepped into the room. "You good, sir?" she asked gently. Malcolm nodded. Slow, not broken, just recalibrating. She handed him a printed folder. "Briefing's ready when you are. We've moved it to 0900 tomorrow. Command insisted we wait until you were rested." Malcolm stood, shoulders heavy but square. "They're watching now. Not just them. Everyone. So we show them who we are." Colonel Warren smiled. "Always." As the door clicked shut behind her, Malcolm looked down at his reflection in the black screen of the TV. The slap, the cuffs, the laughter, it all still burned. But so did the applause from millies, the voices online, the signs waving outside a small-town station. He was never just a soldier. He was a mirror, and the country was finally being forced to look. The next morning, the air around Fort Liberty was thick with anticipation. Reporters clustered outside the gate, cameras clicking as unmarked black SUVs rolled in. Inside the high-security briefing room, dozens of military leaders sat in silence as Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves entered. The room rose to attention, not out of protocol, but out of respect. Malcolm gave a slight nod. "At ease," he said, his voice calm, but edged with something sharper. He walked to the front of the room, placed his folder on the podium, and paused. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to thank everyone for their messages. I've read them, I appreciate them. But let's be clear, this isn't about me. It's about the system, and the next person who won't have the stars or the title to defend themselves." A beat of silence followed. Then he flipped open the folder and launched into the classified intelligence report, like nothing had happened. Target coordinates, drone protocols, mission readiness. He delivered every line with the precision he was known for. The briefing ended exactly 48 minutes later. Not a second wasted. Afterward, Malcolm stepped outside for air. The North Carolina sun was climbing fast, burning off the morning chill. Colonel Denise Warren joined him on the concrete terrace. "You hit every mark," she said, handing him a bottle of water.
"I always do," Malcolm replied.
But they both knew things outside the base were far from finished. By afternoon, Greystone had become a national flashpoint. Protesters now lined the streets outside the police station. Some knelt silently, others chanted, but the message was clear. This wouldn't blow over. Inside the station, the mood had shifted. Officer Brent Keller sat in an empty conference room, his badge removed. A Department of Justice investigator recording every word he said. His eyes were red, not from remorse, just the realization that his career was unraveling. "I didn't know," he muttered. "I didn't mean—" "But you did," the agent interrupted. "You saw a black man in uniform and assumed he was a fraud. That's not a misunderstanding. That's bias in action." Meanwhile, Riley Dean was being deposed across town. His social media history had been leaked. Posts from years ago mocking entitled thugs and dismissing military service as just playing dress-up. The court of public opinion had already ruled, and the official investigation was catching up fast. The final nail came from Greystone's mayor. During a live press conference held in front of City Hall, he faced a sea of microphones. To General Graves, the mayor said, "We failed you. Our officers failed you. But most of all, we failed the values we claim to uphold." That slap was not just an attack on Aiden, it was an attack on everything we're supposed to stand for. Then came the shocker. I have accepted the resignation of Police Chief Dana Foster effective immediately, the mayor announced. We will be conducting a top-down review of our department, launching a civilian oversight board, and implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all city personnel. Back in Fayetteville, Malcolm watched the announcement on TV in the officers' lounge, surrounded by soldiers. No one said a word, but someone clapped first, then another. Soon the room was filled with applause, not loud or theatrical, but respectful, earned. Malcolm stood slowly, turning off the screen. This isn't victory, he said. It's accountability. There's a difference. Later that evening, he got a call from Natalie. They're talking about naming a street after you, she said, half laughing, half emotional. But I told them don't put up a sign unless you're ready to change the road. He smiled at that. Smart woman. I just spoke the truth. Exactly, he said. And that's the first step to rewriting it. That night, as Malcolm walked across the quiet base toward his quarters, the sky was clear, stars sharp overhead. A young black cadet approached him. No words, just a sharp salute and a quiet nod. Malcolm returned the gesture. In that moment, under that silent, endless sky, he didn't feel like a headline. He felt like a link in a chain, one forged through pain, duty, and purpose. And though the world was slow to change, the weight of that salute told him it already had. 3 months later, Greystone didn't look the same. The Welcome to Greystone sign had been repainted, no longer chipped and leaning but freshly restored, now flanked by a new addition, a bronze plaque at its base, reading, "In honor those who serve with dignity and are denied it." Below the line, 2 names had been scratched into history, Lieutenant General Malcolm Graves and Natalie Brooks. It hadn't been just another viral news cycle. The ripple effect from that one night had turned into something bigger than outrage. It became reform. The Greystone Police Department, once a place of shrugged shoulders and blind arrogance, now bore new leadership. The new chief, Renee Caldwell, a no-nonsense former Philadelphia Internal Affairs captain, walked the halls like a woman with purpose. Body cam policies were overhauled. A civilian review board had been put in place, and every officer now completed mandatory anti-bias and de-escalation training, not just once, but quarterly. Officer Keller had resigned quietly before disciplinary hearings concluded. Officer Dean was suspended and later dismissed after more digital evidence surfaced. But what surprised most wasn't just the firings. It was the conversations happening at gas stations, at barbershops, in school gyms. People were finally talking not just about Malcolm Graves, but about how easily respect could be erased by a badge wielded without conscience. Natalie became an unlikely face of change. She continued working at Millie's Grill, but also began speaking at high schools and town halls. One night, standing in the very gym where the town once gathered in tense silence, she said, "I didn't record that video to go viral. I recorded it because I couldn't stay quiet while truth was being shoved into the dirt." That line would later be painted in bold letters on the side of the high school. Malcolm never returned to Greystone. He didn't need to. He followed from afar, through updates from Colonel Warren, news clippings, and the occasional late-night call from Natalie. But his presence lingered in the town's conscience, like a pressure that demanded better. At Fort Liberty, his responsibilities continued. Promotions, briefings, advisory roles, but something had shifted inside him. He started mentoring more young officers, especially those who looked like him. He told them, "They'll test you with silence, with suspicion, but don't shrink, stand taller." Then came the day that would test him once more. A Senate hearing on military discrimination invited him to testify. It wasn't mandatory, but he went. The chamber was cold, overly lit, and filled with politicians looking for headlines. Cameras pointed, reporters scribbled, but Malcolm didn't flinch. He sat at the microphone in full uniform, his ribbons perfectly aligned, his eyes steady. "I'm not here today to shame a town," he began. I'm here to explain how power, when filtered through prejudice, can turn a salute into suspicion. I served this nation overseas. I've lost friends under fire, but the only time I was publicly slapped in uniform was on American soil in a town that didn't think a black man could earn 3 stars. A hush fell over the room. And yet, he continued, I don't carry bitterness. I carry responsibility. Because if I walk away quietly, the next soldier might not get a second chance. The next Natalie might put her wren down. The next department might choose silence. And that is not a country I want to serve. By the time he finished, even the most stoic senators looked shaken. When he stepped out of the Capitol, a group of ROTC cadets waited near the steps. One approached, a young woman, barely 20, in crisp fatigues. Sir, she said, voice quivering, they told me I couldn't do this, that I didn't look the part, but then I read about you. He smiled. Then don't let them write your story, make them read it. She saluted. He returned it. As Malcolm walked toward his car, the spring wind stirred the flags overhead. His phone buzzed again. Natalie had sent another photo from Greystone. A mural now covered the side of Millie's grill. It showed his silhouette in uniform, head high. Behind him, a rising sun, and the words "Dignity has a uniform, and it stands." Malcolm stared at the image for a long time. Then he put his phone away, stepped off the curb, and walked on, shoulders square, steps steady, toward whatever battle still needed fighting. In a world that too often sees the uniform before the humanity, or worse, the skin before the soul, Anu reminds us that dignity isn't granted by a badge, a title, or public opinion. It's earned, lived, and must be defended. As General Malcolm Graves said, they didn't just slap me, they slapped every man who's ever worn this uniform with pride. His story is a mirror, asking us what do we see when we look at others. Dr. King once said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The fight may start in a small-town diner, but its echo can change a nation. If this story stirred something in you, anger, pride, hope, don't scroll past. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tap like if you believe stories like this matter, and if you're walking this road too, hit subscribe. We walk it together.